back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Green Sports Network Fantasy Football Roundtable discussion. I'm James, the Value Man Doc, finally back in action. I had some pressing matters to take care of, but I left you in good hands with my co-hosts, the Greg, the Mad Scientist Bashero, Alex, the Saint DeLaverson, and, of course, the newbie, Jordan, the Goat Tanner. Gentlemen, how are we doing this evening?
Well, it depends on what week we define how well we're doing.
Well, you're back from the dead after your little snooze, so I'm assuming you're all right. Alex is 3-0, so I'm assuming you're doing all right, Alex?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Remember, I laugh in the face of fantasy football tradition, apparently, but here I am, 3-0, with an all-star team ready to take the league. And so, I guess I couldn't be happier.
And Mr. FanDuel, the Goat Tanner, is rocking and rolling for us, I'm sure, on the daily leagues.
That's right, the profit of profit, and I about 300 this week, looking to double that this coming week. So, ready to go.
Awesome.
He will put money in your pocket.
Well, hopefully we will be able to do a little bit of a FanDuel show or DraftKings or whatever your daily league of choice is later here in the week, Jordan. So hopefully you'll be able to stay tuned for that out there. But for right now, we want to focus on the quote-unquote traditional leagues, your normal draft leagues, your standard leagues, where we are, believe it or not, already a quarter of the way through the fantasy football season. And you might be in good shape, like the Saint, going 3-0. Or you could be in some big trouble, like the Mad Scientist and I. We're both 0-3 in the 360 Sports Network League. So the main topic tonight, guys, we want to think about what you should be doing for your team for the long haul as you sit here a quarter of the way through the year. And why don't we begin with the guy who's at the top of the world, Mr. DeLaverson. What are you doing in terms of your team? Are you trying to make big moves, maybe a big trade to try to get your team better for the end, or are you more going to sit tight with that 3-0 record?
What I'm doing is I'm looking at players that I can keep on my roster that will produce for me, not that have produced for me. And I think a lot of times people get that confused. When you offer someone a contract in the NFL, you offer them what they're going to do for you, not what they already done. So that's kind of something I live by. For example, Larry Fitzgerald, great season so far. I'm kind of set, I would say, in terms of wide receivers, but is he going to continue? Is he going to continue that streak of, I would say, dominance? Possibly. Carson Palmer's looking really good. So I'm looking at players that I think might have overachieved. And if I think they maybe have a rough schedule or they're not going to continue that level of production, then, yeah, I am going to try and ship them off. I do the same thing with free agencies. I picked up Marcus Mariota, Chris Johnson. I picked up guys that did not break through, but were about to break through, if that makes any sense. Because when they break through, everyone's going to go for them. So I'm thinking long-term here. I'm thinking if I want to keep this 3-0 record, I am going to have to make some moves because looking at my team, I think I actually have a lot of overachievers. So I guess I'm going to put some players out on the trading block and see what I can get.
Well, speaking of the trading block, Jordan, right before we went on the air, you're 3-0 in your league and are also talking about making a big trade to try to help your team. What's going to end up making the difference in whether you make this trade or not with that 3-0 record?
Yeah, so a lot of what I like to look at, especially if my team's doing well early, is the strength of schedule down the stretch. I think that's something that a novice fantasy player doesn't typically look at. They look at kind of what Alex said, what you're doing right now. So they're going to have the Freemans, the Dion Lewis, even the Travis Benjamins higher valued than what they should be. I'm looking at matchups. I think after 3 weeks, we're already going into a bye week with the Patriots and Tennessee. I think that you need to start to look at, the 0-3 teams, who can I pick off that team because they're now feeling desperation mode? Who on their team has a great upside, great schedule ahead of them, but has underperformed vastly, that I can maybe lowball them and get something that I can throw on my bench until they break out. I think that between the running back nightmare of the first two rounds between C.J. Anderson, Lamar Miller, Forsett, Jeremy Hill, I could go DeMarco Murray. You can go on and on with it, with how many running backs have underperformed, that I think that you look at the matchups, you look at the strength of the schedule, and start targeting, especially if you're in a position where your team's doing well, target the teams that are 0-3 or 1-2, and see if they may be more inclined, given that we're a quarter of the way through, that they may be feeling desperate. They may pull the trigger. In a PPR league, I managed to. I'm 3-0. I traded Landry and T.J. Yeldon for Marshawn Lynch, and it's one of those things that the team is underperforming. They lack the quality player week after week. The consistency. Is Landry upside in PPR great? Yeah, absolutely. He's going to get 100 receptions and he's good for 17 to 20. But looking at my team long term, I don't think that you can dismiss a top 5 rest of the year running back. So I pair him with Forte, and I've got AJ Green and Jordan Matthews. My team's looking better than what it was. So I think that when you're making a trade, you need to, number one, look at your team. If you're 0-3, do not turn into the Chicago Bears and have a fire sale.
So I shouldn't be trying to trade away Andrew Luck right now. Is that what you're telling me?
I hold Luck. They faced the New York Jets. Great defense. Although, they didn't quite show it last week here against the Eagles. I think they've got a great defense. The Bills, although they got blasted against New England, I think has a really strong defense. And then I think you saw a little bit more of the uptick in Andrew Luck against Tennessee. He's having a little bit of shoulder issues, and I think that, receiving-wise, T.Y. Hilton's not 100%. I don't think that he's creating the space that he needs. I think Luck's QBR rating is like 17 when targeting Andre Johnson, so I think that he needs to avoid him like the plague. But if you're in a position where you're 0-3 and you see the upside of Luck, if you can go get somebody that's going to add talent to your team, don't be afraid to take a stab at Dalton. Don't be afraid to take somebody maybe of a little bit lesser value now, upgrade at a different position, and then if you need to, streamline the quarterback position for the rest of the season. Find the Derek Carrs against Chicago. Find these matchups that are going to put you in a place to get back to that 500.
And that's probably exactly what I'm looking to do in the league where I'm 0-3 and have a top quarterback like that. Because especially with all the quarterback injuries out there, somebody out there who's 2-1 might look to make that trade to try to keep at that 2-1 record. But I think it's pretty obvious, though, Greg, in our situation, we're probably trying to make some sort of trade, and the key is, though, not giving up too much and not getting enough in return. How do you balance that? What is it that you look to do?
Well, I'm in a very similar situation to what you're at, and I fully agree with what what Jordan, the GOAT, said here. We're definitely looking at playing the matchups. Right now, the waiver wire in most leagues is pretty desolate. So with that stated, you have to do a couple things. One, look at your team, and my rule of 100 points, is in a full effect here. If you can score over 100 points in the course of a week, is it your team or is it the matchups? And in this particular case, last week I scored 107 points and still lost. in the traditional league that we're in here. So with that stated, are there some players? This is where you have to start weeding out certain players. The players that are consistently in the low to single digits. Definitely, let's get them off the bench. Let's get rid of them. Right now, you have to do an analysis. In my particular case, I have a very strong running back, an RB1, but my RB2s are not so good. So I do have a couple decent wide receivers, a couple decent tight ends. So with that stated, perhaps going after somebody like going back to what Jordan was saying about Chris Johnson and about Bruce Arians stating that Chris Johnson's still going to get the reps even when Andre Ellington gets back. That's huge. So I'm looking at somebody like a Chris Johnson maybe to obtain in a trade by perhaps trading a fairly decent wide receiver too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other point too is a lot of players maybe are going to try to get rid of some of their guys who had a bad week. Maybe they're if they're in our situation, Greg, they might be a little over anxious to get rid of them, and that's when you go and sweep them up. Like, for example, Jordan Matthews only scored 4 points in a standard league last week. That's not going to continue, especially with how that offense did look. I mean, you're going to expect double digits there. You might be able to pick up a guy like him relatively cheap. And I think that's the main thing you have to keep in mind is not going totally haywire with what you're doing, and make sure you stay within yourself. The other thing I say, though, is you're exactly right. At this point, if you're where we are, Greg, 1 week or 2 bad weeks, you can kind of hang on to a guy. But once you've hit week 3, if they've had 2 or 3 straight bad weeks, they have no business being anywhere near your lineup. For example, I just dropped Roddy White. He has no business being on my team anymore.
Well, I dropped Alfred Blue before he went off on his 100-yard binge. But I reminded Alex, I said, I see you have Alfred Blue on your team. Yeah, you did well. I'm like, yeah, but the first 2 weeks. When you have players like that that are streaky like that, it's best maybe to drop them and go after some more consistency. Perfect example, Alex Smith. I was real high on him in week 1. Weeks 2, week 3, not so much. It's once again, it's just something that you have to take a look at and figure out. How long can I put up with mediocrity?
Right, and if I'm Alex, after getting 37 points from Atlanta's running back, he's the one who I'd be looking to trade to an 0-3 team right now.
Definitely.
All right, well,
also...
Yeah, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
Well, if I'm correct, Tevin Coleman is hurt. As far as Alfred Blue, remember, and I said earlier in the show, I'm looking at players I think that were going to have a big week or poised to have a big week. Even though they've had, maybe the first 3 weeks weren't so great, but you read on things, you realize so-and-so might be in room for more carries, more touches. Those are the kind of things you got to do. So, let's take example. Dotson, I know you picked up Richard Matthews in our league from the Dolphins. Great 2 weeks. Had 130 receiving yards about last 2 games. Is he going to continue to do that? I don't know. Maybe like you said, same thing with Freeman. Maybe those are guys you want to think about trading.
Well, and at the very least, if they're on free agency, if you're in my situation, you have to go after it and take that risk. Yeah, he could get a goose egg next week, but at this point, I don't have too much to lose.
Right. And remember, like, Greg, you said, and you were right, Alfred Blue, 42 rushing yards against the Chiefs, 6 yards against Carolina. Now, obviously, going up, I would think is a weak Tampa Bay defense. I picked him up, and I think it worked out well. So next week, Texans are going into the Georgia Dome, playing at the Falcons. Is Blue going to have the same week as he did last week? I don't think so. I don't even have him starting. So it's it's a tricky thing, but I would look to shop. I am looking to shop, I guess, players like Blue and Freeman. So that does seem to be the theme of our show, I would say. Drop them while they're hot, I guess.
Well, there you go. And I think, Jordan, you said it best, too. I mean, we know we always have to keep your eye on the waiver wires and see who we got. And quarterback is the main one. Tyrod Taylor's out there. Joe Flacco's out there, both in about 60% of leagues. They'll get you solid points. But you stumbled upon a very interesting stat about Andy Dalton, who's still available in 60% of leagues. Why don't you share that one with us, Jordan?
Yeah, so year one, Andy Dalton comes out and he's I believe a 13, QB 13. But when he has his weapons healthy, he is top 7 or better. You can throw out last year, and I don't think that as of now what you're seeing from him is a fluke. I think that he does fall in the top 10 quarterback range. You have you've got Marvin Jones, who's having he's coming back to form. AJ Green, he is beyond solid. I think that Eifert, who they call mini Gronk, helps create the separation. You've got an established run game with 2 young backs in Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard. And actually what the statistic was in 2012, he was ranked 12th as a QB in fantasy. 13, he was 5. 14 minus, the weapons, he did fall to 18. And I think that's where everybody kind of avoided him. But when you lose, that type of talent, it is going to have an impact on you. I think they have a solid defense that puts the offense back on the field fast. I think that other than the Patriots, they might be the second best team in the AFC. And I think he's just got too many offensive weapons, with Bernard being able to catch out of the backfield, with Jones and AJ Green, I think is a top 3 receiver. And then Eifert, mini Gronk, I think there's just too many weapons to neglect him.
But how funny is it? I mean, we always talked about, platooning your defenses each week. We can actually talk about platooning quarterbacks. You mentioned earlier Derek Carr with an absolutely great matchup this week against Chicago, and he's had consecutive 300-yard games this year. He only had 1 all of last year. So Amari Cooper being there certainly helps, but, I mean, Derek Carr is on the border of being somebody who you want to keep on your roster, but he's almost a plug-and-play for a lot of guys this week, especially if you have Tom Brady on your roster right now. So that's something to keep an eye on. But, Greg, we're having issue at the running back position. The running backs I see that you could possibly pick up, Bilal Powell did very well for the Jets, and it looks like he could be getting a lot more time again this week with the banged-up Chris Ivory. You can say the same about Carlos Williams in Buffalo. I don't know how he's available in any league, but he's actually out there still in 75% of leagues. Who's flashing their eyes on your end?
That DeAnthony Thomas, he's a third down back. He can get you some points. He's available out there in a few leagues.
What do you think of Lance Dunbar? I mean, he's another third down back, but I mean, he had 10 catches last week.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they're getting the targets, I was just going to say Lance Dunbar as well. That would be, as long as they're getting the targets. That's the big thing. If they're getting the looks, yeah, definitely. But if they're not getting the looks, it's and that's really the tough call right now. Because you have so many. I don't want to say running, but you have so many running back right committees, for God's sakes. I mean, even with Eddie Lacy's supposed injury, where they had Starks in there. I mean, Starks was the insurance policy out there, but it's not going to be the case. So anybody that picked up Starks, you may as well just drop him now because Eddie Lacy's back. But it's oh gosh, I'm looking right now. It's a vast wasteland.
Right. If you're in a competitive league like we are, it's nearly impossible to find these guys, and that's why you maybe need to take a real shot in the dark. And a couple of the 3-0 teams out there is who would be most likely to get him. The guy I'm looking at, Thomas Rawls from Seattle, he had 100 yards last week in relief of Marshawn Lynch. I mean, Lynch only ran 5 times, and people like Jordan, I think you mentioned it. People might be a little quick to get rid of Lynch, but I mean, I think it's just a standard injury. But is that somebody maybe you should pick up if Rawls starts just for 1 week to plug and play if you have to? Is that something you could possibly do, or is that going too much of a stretch?
No, I mean, I definitely think it's something that you got to take a look at. I know that, having acquired Lynch in a trade, I did use, I believe it was $10 on Rawls on the waiver wire. Simply put, when you're dealing with calf injuries, when you're dealing with hamstring injuries, I think it limits the running back. And, although Seattle, got their first win, I think that, they're starting to click. They go against Detroit. Detroit doesn't look to really have anything, to talk about on their end. The coach, for whatever reason, wants to continue to feed Joik rather than letting Abdullah shine. But, I definitely think that you have to get Rawls. And then also to, kind of touch base on what you guys had mentioned earlier, from a PPR standpoint, if you do not have Lance Dunbar and he is out there, you absolutely must get him. He is 30 yards shy of Emmanuel Sanders, Jeremy Maclin, DeAndre Hopkins, Randall Cobb in receiving yards. He is a prime PPR back, an absolute must start for a flex standpoint in 12-man leagues. I don't think people, he had a big week, with 100 yards receiving, but I think people dismiss the fact that week 1 he also had 70 receiving yards, and then I think 50 in week 2. So from a PPR standpoint, Lance Dunbar is going to be, definitely somebody you want to target. And I think another point I want to make here is, people forget about Thursday night games. And, you had the Giants and you had the Skins. And Andre Williams, although he, it doesn't look like anybody's running away with that backfield. If you want to take a shot, you want to take a gamble, Andre Williams and Antonio Andrews from Tennessee are 2 gambles to worth taking. Number one, Antonio Andrews out-carried, the entire Tennessee backfield. The only one that averaged over 3 yards a carry. I think he averaged like 4.1 yards and a touchdown. And Andre Williams out-touched the entire Giants backfield. And it looks to be like, they're wanting to try and get him, involved. They're wanting to feed him. And for a 3-0 team, if you're looking for one player that, is last year's Odell Beckham, if you're looking for somebody that's, going to put you above the top, you're able to take those flyers. You're able to take those risks. And, you can substitute a spot on your bench for an Andrews, for an Andre Williams, for a Christine Michael. You've got Joseph Randall has this incredible game, and everybody, wants to hype that up. But what they don't look at is, if you go back and look at Randall's carries, he averaged 30, 40, 30, 20, and then from there it went 1, -1, -2, 1, 3. They don't have anybody that can run between the tackles. Christine Michael got he got reps with the first team at practice today, and McFadden looks to be already going by the wayside. So if you're looking at that backfield, Christine Michael could end up taking the role as a primary back there because he does run through the tackles. And then you want to look at Dunbar from a PPR standpoint. But I think I really like Andrews out of Tennessee. It's a bye week. Nobody's going to be looking at him because he's not going to provide value this week. He had 12, 14 touches. But I think that, the lack of consistency with Sankey, McCluster, and then and then the other kid getting hurt, it really just showcases that if they're going to want to try and run the ball, and they lost that game late because they couldn't, Fowler's not going to get it done. Sankey, McCluster, they all averaged less than 2.5 yards a carry. And I think that Antonio Andrews might be worth a flyer to help put you over the top.
And you mentioned it right there. Being on bye this week definitely helps. You can not waste a waiver pick possibly, and you can try to pick him up on free agency when no one else looks at him. Here's what I thought the stat of the night would be until you brought up the Dalton stat. Lance Dunbar has 21 receptions. That's more than Matt Forte had at this point last year. Matt Forte last year set the single-season record with 102 catches as a running back. Dunbar is on pace to beat that. Go ahead, Alex.
See, there's like a part of me though that if you're in a standard scoring league, that kind of wants me to shy away from a Dallas running back. This is kind of, I think, similar to how the New England running back situations have been over the years. McFadden, Dunbar, Randall, Michael. It's just this, I think, is a perfect example where it comes into a know your league. Because if you're in a standard league, I'm probably not picking up Dunbar. But if you are in PPR, then yeah, it'd be a great fit. It's just you have 4 backs there, and I just feel like any week one of those backs could break through, have a great game, and then a back you're starting in your lineup might not do anything. So this is a very, I would say, tricky scenario. I think if you're going to use a Dallas running back, I really think it's going to have to be on a week-by-week basis more than relying on a Dallas running back to get your team through this season. So I don't know if any Dallas running backs right now are any solid long-term options.
Well, I think Randall might be a long-term option out there, only because he's starting to emerge as the consistent threat. But once again, if I'm going to look at him as he's definitely not an RB1 type guy, he's more like an RB3 at the best.
Yeah, you're right. He won't be your savior at all, will he, Greg?
That's why you might want to think of stopping them.
Right. One of the things that I'm looking at here, too, if I can't find I've got a bunch of decent, okay type guys. And if you happen to have a roster with a bunch of Joseph Randalls and Melvin Gordons on it, going back to what Jordan was talking about, which was looking at the matchups, and once again, I'm reverting back to my old self here, Dodson. This is where the kicker and the defense really can make a difference now. Let's take a look at the matchups. Let's take a look and see if we can get 12 points out of somebody like a Robbie Gould. Let's see if we can pick up, 17 or 18 points out of a Bills defense or out of a defense like, Miami or somebody like that. And sometimes those can make all the differences. And that can also perhaps mask maybe a problem, get you through another week or two until you see somebody pop up on that waiver wire, which is that solid RB2 that you're looking for.
Absolutely. We are in week 4, so yes, we are now into bye week territory. So obviously I need to keep your eye on the waiver wire for possible waiver wire pickups. We mentioned if you have Tom Brady, you're probably looking to pick up Derek Carr for sure, or it is possible that Taylor or Dalton are still out there. They would be great bye week plug-ins. If you have Gronkowski and you need to pick somebody up, Charles Clay is available in about 80% of leagues for Buffalo. He's got touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, so those are a couple names that you might be looking for if you are in need of a bye week replacement. And that's where I think things get a little bit interesting now, and you really get to see the depth of your team. And that's where, Greg, your team looks to be pretty solid because you have that depth. You can play matchups, and when the time comes that you have your big guys on bye, your secondary guys aren't exactly, cupcakes coming off the bench. They're like a 1A, 1B type deal. You're not losing too much, whereas some of the guys who have started off strong could be in that situation. If they lose, I have the one team I'm actually playing this week. I got lucky. He has Tom Brady on bye, Gronkowski on bye, and Edelman on bye. Woo!
Right.
Wiping my brow.
Now, with all that being said, I want everybody to remember this. In most leagues, if you're in a league of 12 people, the top 6 teams make the playoffs. All you have to do to win your league is to be good enough to get into one of those top 6 slots.
And some even in the top 8 slots, and that makes it
Right.
even
So,
easier.
I mean, and I'm going to cross sports here. As I'm keeping one eye on the Pirates game, and the Pirates are doing an absolutely horrible job today, but they're in the playoffs. It doesn't really matter that they don't win the Central Division. All they have to do is win that one key game to keep moving forward. And that's the philosophy I think we have to take here, especially if you're an 0-3 team right now with almost a quarter of the season behind us here. Don't lose the forest through the trees. Just be good enough to get to that last playoff spot. Be that 70%er, that person that just barely squeaks by and gets to C in school. But you know what? C's pass.
Absolutely, and I mean I have the perfect example of that in the playoffs, a 1 versus 8 matchup. Never know what's going to happen. I remember sitting with my one friend, and he needed about literally 6 touchdowns to have any chance on Monday Night Football, and he had a backup quarterback named McCown playing in Chicago. Wouldn't you know that guy would go and throw for 6 touchdowns? He ended up dancing on top of the bar by the end of the night because he won the matchup as an 8 seed. So anything is possible. So all you got to do is get in, and then the rest is up to you at that point. You need to have your team ready to go come playoff time.
I'm going to cross sports here, too. And, obviously you guys think I've promised to begin with, but after this statement, you tell me. I think, Greg was talking about all you need to do is get into the playoffs, and anything can happen. And obviously that's true, and that's great. But if you ask any college basketball coach, they value their regular season tournament or their regular season championship over the conference tournament championships. And the question is why? Because it represents a full season of hard work. It represents a larger body of work. So I almost sometimes feel more proud of a team that I had that might have went 11-0 or 10-1 and lost in the first round of the playoffs than a team that goes 6-6 and gets hot at the end. So I just feel like in most leagues I like to reward a regular season champ too, like right underneath the playoff champion. So I don't know what you guys think about that. Am I onto something there, or am I crazy? Or what?
No, you said it right there. I was going to say, do you get a trophy for finishing first in the regular season? Do you get money for finishing first in the regular season? 99% of leagues out there say no. I'm actually in a league right now, though, that is paying out an equal amount to whoever scores the most points throughout the whole year.
Yeah, because that represents how you drafted and how you manage the waiver wire.
Right.
Yeah, but you know what? The best team isn't always the winner.
That is very true.
We see that in baseball. We see this in football. My God, when the Pittsburgh Steelers won the Super Bowl, they were a 6th seed going in to the playoffs. They barely made it into the playoffs, yet they had a tremendous run and they won the Super Bowl in Detroit that year.
Exactly.
So the best team doesn't always win the championships, and that's the point that I'm getting at here. If you have just have enough, catch that lightning in the bottle when you can, and just run with it and see what you got.
Right. Well, and I got to give a huge shout out here to one of our 3SN contributors, Tony Borelli, because last year in the league that I run, I ended up winning the championship, but I didn't deserve it. I knew I didn't deserve it, but my team just ended up doing the best at the right time. I mean, I had 6 people on my team who were lost for the whole season with injury. But what Tony did, he went and apparently he had lots of time at work, and I hope his boss isn't listening right now, but he had lots of time at work one day, and he started digging up all these stats from our fantasy season based on, regular lineup you had versus the optimal lineup versus injuries versus versus who you were playing, and would you have beaten the majority of the teams during the week, or did you score 50 points and your opponent only scored 49, that sort of thing. He broke all that down, and he ended up figuring out, of the 12 teams, which team was like the legit best and which team like overachieved the most. And it was in a landslide. My team was the number one overachiever. It was not even close. That the quote unquote luck factor was on my side beyond all belief. And it's those things that really proved to me, like as I'm looking at it, I knew I was, a little bit lucky, but the numbers never lie, and it was no doubt about it. I was the by far the luckiest. Things just fell my way. I had good matchups at the right time, and that there were at least 3 weeks down the stretch where I needed wins to make the playoffs. And if I had played nearly anybody else in the league than who I played that week, I would have lost. I shouldn't have even made the playoffs, and then somehow I'm the one holding the trophy. It's a pretty trophy, and I don't mind holding it, but I definitely got lucky in holding it.
That's right. That's why we play the game.
Absolutely.
I think that's a wrap.
All right, gentlemen, any final thoughts as we head into the 4th week of our season?
Yeah, I just want to say I definitely look forward to giving everybody my plays for both FanDuel and DraftKings this week. I'd like to have it done by Saturday night. If not, I will release it around 10 a.m. Sunday morning. Again, I think that everybody you need to be cautious. Again, don't let the 0-3 deter you. Don't make foolish trades. Don't let the low ball offers that may look enticing in the short term cloud your judgment on the long term. 0-3, you're not out of it. I know that I just pawned Jeremy Hill off on somebody for Forte in a league, and I'm one to take advantage of the more novice amateur player that goes into panic mode, 0-3 and 1-2, but don't sell yourself short. Know what your value is and stick to it, and live and die by the team you drafted, and make sure that you're on Roto World and you're on Twitter and you're following these news alerts, because these are going to be what gets you the advantage over the average player in your league. A lot of people don't see what's trending. They don't know about Christine Michael getting first reps with the starters. They don't know about the players with these upside. The Bruce Arians coming out and saying that even when Ellington comes back, Chris Johnson's going to be a factor. So you got to be active, you got to do your research, and you got to be diligent. But don't let your team, don't sell yourself short because of your record.
Absolutely, and I know Alex the Saint DeLaverson isn't going to go and take advantage of those novice players like the GOAT is. Isn't that right, Alex?
I guess so, but...
Wow, he's got a little devilish instinct in him.
Probably not, but my final thought, I guess I'm actually going to be bragging here. This weekend, me and the GOAT were talking about this past weekend, we're talking about how interesting this weekend was in terms of matchups, who to sit, who to play. It was definitely one of the more frustrating weeks in fantasy football, I believe. And I was quite pleased with the GOAT's lineup. I was pleased with my predictions. I was pleased with all of our team, all of our fantasy football toolkit team. And I really felt like we set ourselves apart. And if we keep showing people how great our predictions are and how great our rankings are during weeks like that, I mean, I think it shows we're pretty legitimate. So I'm really proud of the team we have here, and I'm really excited about the direction that 3SN and the toolkit is going in.
Absolutely. And Greg, the mad scientist, the seasoned veteran, would you take us out, please, sir?
Well, final thoughts. Just don't panic. Go with trend analysis. And on that thought, have a great of each 4. See you on the toolkit.